The Persians come to make slaves of us all. I have a better idea. I say we drench the gods with their blood! What say you, Spartans?
Good morning everyone, Prime here, and today we're going to be talking about Leonidas, the Spartan king, and talking about who exactly he was. So, he was the son of Alexandrides, whose wife at the time was barren and unable to provide him with a son, which was a big problem in Sparta because one of the many duties of women, as we've covered in previous videos, was to procreate, was to produce children. So the elders and other rulers of Sparta prompted or tried to convince Alexandrides to get another wife and annul his marriage, but he proclaimed that his current wife, his niece, was innocent, blameless. But eventually he does get a second wife, but doesn't annul his marriage. So this second wife bears him a son called Cleomenes, and afterwards his first wife bears him a son called Dorius. And eventually she also bears him twins, Leonidas and Cleombrotus. So the first wife bears him 3 children and the second wife 1 child, which is kind of funny. I'm sure those women weren't laughing at the time, but 100 years later, I can kind of see the irony there. Which seems like a bit of trolling by life, but, happens. So people in Cleomenes' position would have had a special Spartan upbringing that would groom him to become a ruler of Sparta, whilst Leonidas, Cleombrotus, and most likely Dorius, though I'm not 100% sure on Dorius, would have had the traditional agoge training. Definitely Leonidas and Cleombrotus, but if anyone knows if Dorius would have been groomed for leadership as well, just in case things didn't work out with Cleomenes or whatever happened to Dorius, let me know. And the only reason why I'm not 100% sure about Dorius is because once it becomes clear that Cleomenes will be the king after Alexandrides dies and Cleomenes takes over his position, Dorius either at that point goes off to Africa to start a colony, or when the throne passes him by and Leonidas becomes the second king, he refuses to serve under his brother and tries to establish a colony in Africa. That goes about as well as sticking a super soaker in a toaster and squeezing the trigger, but you have to wonder, why would he even feel entitled to the position of king if he wasn't groomed or if he didn't feel like he was ready or getting the position in some way or another? So perhaps he probably was raised in the same way that he was raised Cleomenes. But considering the fact that Cleomenes eventually became quite paranoid, it also makes me wonder, were the two sort of pitted against each other? And they were 2 perfectly healthy, strong candidates for kingship after all, sharing the blood of Alexandrides, so even though Cleomenes was older and it ultimately did make sense that he became the king, still, I wouldn't be surprised if they were pitted against each other and had some sort of conflict or some sort of sick-twisted, competition with each other as they were growing older and being groomed for leading, because the Spartans liked that sort of thing. Not for any sort of malicious reasons. If you go back and watch my Spartan video, you'll know why they would have liked it and why I'm even coming up with this, but yeah, interesting stuff to think about there. Of course, this is headcanon. Anyways, we've already gone over the agoge and how tough and dangerous and brutal of an experience that is in a previous video, so I'll link that in a card here. You can go ahead and check that out after this video if you like. As the ruler of Sparta, Cleomenes more or less ignores the Persian conflict. He's not very interested in it, but what he is interested in is the conflict between the Greek states. So he goes after a couple of Spartan kings and is victorious there, and he also goes after a few Athenian leaders and Athenian-controlled city-states and land. But eventually he does something that forces him to flee Sparta. And before we get onto that, Leonidas himself marries Gorgo, his half-brother's sister, which was actually part of a long-going avunculate tradition within Leonidas' family, which is more or less just marrying within the family to keep bloodlines strong and pure. We'll get on to why exactly they'd want to do that specifically with Leonidas' bloodline, but yes, that was a thing. After all, their gods did it and it seemed to work out for them, so why wouldn't it work out for the actual people themselves? Don't answer that in the comment section. So Cleomenes might have disrespected an oracle in some way by bribing them, which was a big no-no, or he might have attacked the wrong Spartan king. But either way, an action like that was the reason that he had to flee Sparta, and the Spartans do eventually bring him back to Sparta, and they reinstate him as king. But this doesn't matter much. Or, if that's not the case, then when they return him to Sparta, they return him to Sparta in chains and imprison him. It's sometime after this point that he either A, commits suicide, or B, is snuffed, murdered. gotten rid of. And which one that is, I'm really not sure. If you guys do know, let me know in the comment section below which one you think it is, or which one you know it to be. The history there is kind of hazy, foggy, if you will. As I said, he returned to Sparta a bit crazed, and if he was in the position of power, there's a good chance that, yes, he just killed himself, but if he was in prison, I don't know, perhaps there were people that would have wanted him snuffed. Or perhaps there still would have been people who would have wanted him gotten rid of as king, but yes. Leonidas took the throne next, and it was customary for a Spartan king to have a son, so he made sure that was all taken care of before he did anything too serious, military-wise. Leonidas himself was said to be a descendant of Hercules, about 20 generations away, so yeah, you can understand why he would have married Gorgo. Or at least, well, understand to a degree, even if you still find it nasty. Leonidas himself wanted to do something about the conflict with the Persians, but first had to consult the oracles, and the oracles told him that he shouldn't go to war, essentially, and that he'd most likely die, or that his death would be an outcome. But he ignored the oracles and went anyway. It was clear that the Persians had the numbers, even despite the Greek city-states joining forces. Leonidas had the idea to engage them in Thermopylae, which was a narrow coastal pass that allowed Leonidas and his 6,000 to 7,000 men or so, which were a combined force of Spartans and all other types of Greek warriors, including Helots, funny enough, that would engage the enemy in Thermopylae. This location sort of separated the Persians from their fairly daunting naval forces and forced them to sort of funnel their troops into this narrow path, which of course meant that they couldn't use the full might of their army, which was an obvious plus for Leonidas. In fact, it was such a plus that the Spartan forces were able to hold out for 2 days, even proving that the Persian elite, the Immortals, were very much mortal. And of course, Xerxes, the Persian king, wasn't particularly pleased with this outcome. He was getting quite frustrated, but at some point, a Greek traitor decides to tell Xerxes of an extra little mountain pass, or a flanking route behind the Spartan forces. And once the Spartans realize that they're screwed, Leonidas commands all of his men, except the Spartans, to retreat and return to their sort of Greek homes and prepare for Persian conflict, or the rest of the Persian conflict rather. Now, part of the reason why they had to retreat is because the Spartans fought using a phalanx system, or a phalanx system, which allowed the men to form a sort of shield wall with the shields overlapping the men. They sort of stand in a line. And it was a great defense from the front that it still allowed them to attack with spears. Its weakness was that it was weak to flanking attacks, so attacks from the side or the back. And of course, the more men that die, the smaller and weaker the shield wall, because there are less men to make up shields to make the shield wall, right? That's not necessarily the only reason why the Spartan forces ordered the retreat, because, a flank from a foe with far more men than you is bad news anyways, right? So I'm sure there are other reasons why Leonidas ordered the retreat, but that strat was their main strat, and it wasn't good to know that they were going to be flanked. Even with this knowledge, the Thespians, who were about 400 men strong, refused to leave the Spartan side and decided to die with the Spartans, who were about 300 men strong. Of course, this is by the start of the conflict. At this point, I'm not sure how many men were still alive, but yeah. The Thespians and the Spartans decided to stand against the Persians together to hold off the enemy so that everyone else, including the Helots, could survive and return to their homes. Now in Assassin's Creed, Leonidas is a fairly old, gruff man when he's on the battlefield and clearly going to die, and this is actually accurate. He was a very old man. Well, perhaps not a very old man, but, he'd lived quite a decent portion of his life by the time he started this battle in Thermopylae, so yes, he wouldn't have been as young as he was in the movie 300, right? He would have been older than that. Also, he most likely died on the 3rd day of the battle. As I said, the Spartan forces held off the Persians for about 2 days, so yes, 3rd day of the battle. And I suppose, don't mess with oracles because they're 100% correct all the time? Maybe, maybe not, but they were right here, so, One thing the oracles failed to mention, though, is that Leonidas' head would be removed and that he'd be crucified or his body would be shamed in some way, because Xerxes was kind of a very angry man that doesn't like to be messed with, and he kind of played around with Leonidas' body a little bit. His body was recovered by Spartan forces, but Xerxes had his fun with it. A bit of fun with it. Now, assuming that we actually get to go to Thermopylae in Assassin's Creed, there might actually be some Easter eggs there that you might want to look out for. Because in our world, there were certain shrines or commemorative statues built for Leonidas and his men at Thermopylae, so you might actually be able to find those in-game, depending on whether those have been built yet. That could be cool. And in Greece, there was a cult started for Leonidas after his death. So, 2 things to look out for in the game, if you're getting it. But that was more or less the story on Leonidas. What do you think? Do you think he was an awesome Spartan king? Do you think he'll be a great addition in the story of Assassin's Creed Odyssey? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, or more content like this, and you haven't subscribed to the channel already, go ahead and do so. I'd be happy to have you, and a great community here. But until the next video, have a very good day. I have been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.